I had to go back to the same street every day to find him, and he came back to the same street every day to find me. 2 men, 1 street, every day. While thousands of soldiers fought across Aachen's ruined buildings, only these 2 were looking for each other. And every morning, both of them knew, today might be the last day. October 1944. Aachen, Germany. The city was one of the oldest in Germany, Charlemagne's capital, the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. Historic buildings, narrow stone streets, a cathedral that had stood for centuries. But in October 1944, almost nothing remained of that city. Allied bombardments had been pounding it for weeks. Buildings had collapsed. Streets had become rubble fields. And the Germans had dug into every corner, every ruined building, every basement. Aachen mattered. This city on Germany's western border sat directly on the Allied route to the Rhine River. And Hitler had ordered it. Aachen would be defended to the last. Sergeant Ray Walker entered this city in October 1944. He came from Texas. He was a farmer's son who had been handling rifles since childhood. But the street fighting inside Aachen was like nothing he had ever trained for. He knew how to fight in open country. This was different. Every doorway was a threat. Every window a potential trap. Every corner a possible death. He entered from the east with his company. On the first day, he lost 3 men. On the second day, 2 more. And every time the casualty report came from the same street. There were dozens of streets in the city, but that street was different. Anyone who passed through it died. Walker wrote this in his diary. My commander looked at me and said, "You find him." He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to.
The Battle of Aachen lasted from October 2nd to October 21st, 1944. It represented the first major urban battle that Allied forces fought on German soil during the Second World War. The American 30th and 1st Infantry Divisions encircled the city. The fact that this was the first urban engagement on German territory gave Aachen enormous significance, both tactically and psychologically. The city's defense was led by SS units and regular German infantry who had prepared their positions in advance.
When Walker first went to that street, he saw nothing. Ruined apartment buildings, overturned vehicles, rubble piled everywhere. Everything looked the same. It was early morning and the fog hadn't lifted yet. Walker pressed himself into a doorframe and waited. An hour passed. Nothing. Then he heard something. Far away, very faint. A movement. A stone shifting. Maybe the wind, maybe not. Walker took out his scope. Further down the street, on the second floor of a destroyed building, there was a window. The glass was gone. Rubble surrounded it. It looked ordinary, but something caught his attention. In front of the window there was a small pile of stones. Not natural. Someone had placed them there. Why? Walker waited. He waited until midday. Not a single movement. When he got back to the company that evening, he told his commander. The commander shrugged. "Are you sure?" he said. "Could have just been debris." Walker wasn't certain, but he knew one thing. That window was a position, and someone was inside it. He waited for morning. He didn't sleep. On the second day, he went back to that street at first light. This time he approached from a different direction, more carefully, more slowly, and he began to watch that window. In the afternoon, he caught a small movement. Just a moment, a shadow. Something had shifted inside the window. That was enough.
Urban combat conditions in Aachen made sniper activity exceptionally effective for both sides. Destroyed buildings provided natural cover and ready-made firing positions. German defenders had prepared the city in advance, positioning dedicated sniper posts at critical points throughout. The pace of the American advance slowed significantly because of these positions. A single sniper placed at a strategic location could hold an entire street under control for hours, sometimes for an entire day.
On the third day, Walker had a decision to make. He knew the window now. He knew the German sniper was in there, but knowing wasn't enough, because firing directly at that window wasn't possible. The angle was wrong, the distance too great, and the rubble between them cut off the line of sight. He needed to find another way. Walker drew the street in his mind over and over. From which building could he see which window? From which angle would that position be visible? The questions were simple. The answers were dangerous, because every movement carried the risk of death. He turned to the young soldier beside him, Eddie Cortez. "Will you come with me?" he said. Cortez was 20 years old. He had just joined the company. 3 weeks at the front. There was fear in his eyes, but he nodded. "Where?" he said. Walker pointed to a ruined building on the far side of the street. "There. We climbed to the 3rd floor. From there we can see that window." Cortez looked at the building. It was half collapsed. Half the walls were gone. The ceiling had come down. The stairs were damaged. "Will it hold?" he said. "I don't know," said Walker. "But there's no other way." They moved in the dark. It was 4 in the morning. The street was silent. They crawled across the rubble, slipped through a doorway, climbed the broken staircase. The building groaned with every step. When they reached the 3rd floor, Walker looked out through the window opening. The position was directly across from him, clearly visible, and someone was inside it. He could feel it. He waited for morning. Cortez sat quietly beside him.
Night movement was of critical tactical importance in the urban fighting at Aachen. Daytime visibility created lethal risk for both sides. American units were forced to shift the majority of their repositioning and reconnaissance activity into the hours of darkness. The structural reliability of damaged buildings presented a separate danger entirely. Compromised walls and collapsed ceilings exposed soldiers not only to enemy fire, but to the constant risk of the building coming down around them.
Morning came. The sun rose. Walker was in position. His rifle was ready, his breathing slow. Cortez waited silently beside him. Neither of them spoke, because sound was dangerous. He waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, nothing. Walker began to doubt himself. Maybe the German sniper had moved. Maybe he had left during the night. Maybe he had never been there at all, and the whole calculation was wrong. But he didn't move, because moving meant giving everything away. At the end of the 3rd hour, Cortez touched his arm. Gently, he pointed one finger toward that window. Walker looked. Inside the window, there was a small movement. Very small, a shadow shifting. Less than a second. Walker took aim. He held his breath. His finger moved toward the trigger, but he didn't fire, because it wasn't clear enough yet, and firing without certainty would give away his own position. He waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Then the movement came again, larger this time. A shoulder, an arm, the barrel of a rifle. Walker fired. 1 shot, silence, a long silence. Cortez was holding his breath. Walker didn't lower his rifle. He waited. It could still be a trap, but no movement came from that window again. That day, no casualties came from that street. The next day, either. Walker wrote a single line in his diary. "That street was quiet today. I hope it stays that way tomorrow."
American forces in the Battle of Aachen were advancing an average of 2 to 3 city blocks per day, an extremely slow pace, with casualties consistently high. German defenders treated every building, every room as a separate defensive position. Neutralizing a single sniper sometimes meant opening up an entire street. What Walker accomplished on that street may appear small in scale. In tactical terms, it represented a critical breakthrough in the company's ability to move forward.
Walker had silenced that street, but Aachen kept going. Every day a new street, every day a new threat, every day a new loss. Walker moved forward with his company, careful at every step, cautious at every corner. But caution wasn't always enough. At the end of the 4th day, Cortez was wounded. A piece of shrapnel from a window had struck his left arm. Not deep, but it was bleeding. Walker walked him to the evacuation point. As Cortez was leaving, he said, "How do you get up every morning? How do you keep going back to those streets?" Walker didn't answer, because he didn't have an answer. Getting up every morning was a decision, not a conscious one, just a movement. Eyes open, feet hit the floor, rifle picked up, without thinking. Because thinking was dangerous. The Battle of Aachen ended on October 21st, 1944. The city was in Allied hands, but the cost was heavy. 34 men from Walker's company had entered the city. 21 came out. Walker was among the 21, but coming out didn't mean it was over. When he closed his eyes, he could still see those streets, those windows, those shadows. Years later, in an interview, he said, "After Aachen, I could never look through a window comfortably again. Every window reminds me of something. I can't fully explain what. I just can't look."
The Battle of Aachen resulted in more than 5,000 American casualties. German losses amounted to approximately 5,000 killed and wounded. with a further 5,600 taken prisoner. The psychological cost of urban combat was severe for both sides, fighting in narrow streets, inside ruined buildings, under constant threat left deep and lasting trauma in the soldiers who went through it. Post-war studies found that the majority of Aachen veterans developed a persistent fear of enclosed spaces and upper-floor windows that stayed with them for the rest of their lives.
Aachen had fallen. The first major German city was in Allied hands. Symbolically, this was enormous. Hitler had said Aachen would be defended to the last, but the city had fallen, and that fall created a deep fracture inside Germany. But for Walker, symbolic victories meant nothing. What mattered was this: that street was open now, that window was silent, and the men in his company had made it through one more day. Military history didn't record Aachen as a great strategic victory. It wasn't Normandy, it wasn't the Bulge, but it was the first stone in the door that opened into Germany. And the people who opened that door weren't the commanders of great armies. They were men like Walker, men who went back to the same streets every morning, faced a new threat every day, and whose names would never make it into the history books. Walker went home to Texas after the war, back to the farm. He didn't tell people much. His neighbors knew him as a quiet, private man. But every morning, he woke up very early. His wife asked him one day, "Why do you always get up so early?" Walker thought for a moment. Then he said, "I got used to waiting in the mornings. I can't sleep anymore."
The fall of Aachen deeply shook Germany's defensive psychology on the Western Front. The loss of the first major city on German soil caused serious damage to morale, both among the civilian population and within the military. Military historians regard the Battle of Aachen as an important reference point in the development of modern urban warfare doctrine. The lessons learned during the fighting were directly applied to the planning of subsequent urban operations as Allied forces pushed deeper into Germany.
Almost nobody today knows the name Ray Walker. When Aachen is remembered, the conversation turns to large numbers. How many cities fell? How many armies advanced? How many days it lasted? Walker is a single point inside those numbers, a small entry in reports that never even mention his name, buried somewhere in thousands of pages. But that street existed, and every morning a man went back to it. When the survivors of his company gathered in later years, they talked about Walker. "Do you remember that street?" they would say. "Do you remember how he went back every morning?" Everyone remembered, because Walker going back to that street every morning had given them something that couldn't quite be put into words. Maybe courage, maybe hope, or maybe just this: someone is doing something. Walker passed away in 1987. In his small town in Texas, the survivors from his company came to the funeral. Old men, white-haired, moving slowly. They looked at each other and said very little, because some things don't fit into words. Aachen is still standing today. The historic cathedral was rebuilt. The stone streets were relaid. Tourists come, take photographs, walk through the historic buildings. That street is still there too. Children run along it. People walk it. Life goes on. On some walls, in some corners, if you look carefully, there are still bullet marks. Most people don't notice them, but the marks are there. And every morning when the sun falls on that street, as if nothing ever happened, the light catches the stones in exactly the same way it always has, as if nobody ever waited there at all.
The Battle of Aachen holds an important place in both German memory and international military history literature. The marks of the fighting have been partially preserved and can still be seen in parts of the city. The battle continues to be studied in academic circles for what it reveals about the human cost of urban warfare and the role of individual soldiers within it. The stories of unnamed men like Walker have survived largely through oral history work, passed down by the soldiers themselves, in the years when they were still alive to tell it.